Let's speak now to Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary Dominic Raab. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Let's just work out where we are here. There's a 40-mile column of Putin's armour just outside this capital, about to lay siege to Kiev, capital of a free democratic country, and the West is not going to stop him. How does that sit with you?
Well, I'm not sure I'd accept that characterisation. First of all, we pay tribute to the heroic defence.
Which bit of the characterisation? Which bit?
Allow me to explain.
That they're there, or that the West is going to stop them?
Can I give the answer, and then you can pick up on any aspect of it? Sure. First of all, we do pay tribute to the heroic defence by the Ukrainian forces and their fortitude in the face of outright aggression from President Putin. Our view as the UK is that Putin's mission in Ukraine must fail. I don't think it's right to say that we've done nothing to stop or curtail what Putin is doing. I think if you look at not just the suite of sanctions on oligarchs and on banks and on the Russian state, but also the impact that the collective action has had, including on the central bank and on the SWIFT payment system. We've seen the biggest fall in the ruble against the dollar. We've seen the stock market in Russia fall to record lows, and the central bank in Russia have to double interest rates. And that is all part of the allied, if you like, the UK working with our international partners' efforts to starve Putin's war machine. And it does have an impact. And of course, as your correspondent...
Just with respect, Mr. Raab, I didn't say you were doing nothing to stop him. I said you were not going to stop him. He is going to surround this capital, lay siege to this capital. And I asked you how it sat with you that could happen. NATO has the most powerful air force in the world, and this is happening in a European capital in 2022.
Well, of course, Ukraine's not a member of NATO. We've been clear about that in terms of military participation. But what we have done is arm something like 20,000 Ukrainian troops. We've sent 2,000 anti-tank missiles. We've provided a package of support, £100 million. And, of course, allies and partners have done further support. We yesterday announced 40 million additional in humanitarian assistance. So we are, along with the sanctions suite. And it has had an impact in the way I described on Putin. But we know that Putin will react to this, or we fear that Putin will react to this with even more barbaric tactics. And that's why we need to be prepared that this could be a long haul. And we will do everything we can to achieve our goals of making Putin fail.
You seem to be saying... Yeah, but you seem to be saying that there's less of a moral case, there's less of a humanitarian case, there's less of an urgent case because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. Isn't a humanitarian case and a moral case absolutely urgent now? And does it matter really that it's not a matter of NATO, it's not a member of NATO?
I think the NATO is incredibly relevant in terms of how we apply the principle of collective self-defence. Of course it is. But what you're right to say is that morally we feel a strong duty to do everything we can to degrade Putin's war machine, hence the sanctions. I've described the impact they're having. Also the efforts we're taking to support and steel the resolve and the defensive capabilities of the Ukrainians, which we've done in the way I described. On top of that, the humanitarian support. And we're working with our international partners. I think it's been a pretty clear and concerted response.
Yes, but your argument, Mr. Raab, your argument seems to be that, you know, the argument for not acting is that it could start another world war or, heaven forbid, some sort of nuclear war. Well, then what is to stop President Putin going on to attack other countries, just using the same nuclear threat, even countries that are members of NATO?
Well, what is to stop him is this is turning into a much, much more perilous misadventure for Putin than I think he realised. And as your report made clear, it has had a demoralising effect on Russian forces, some of those young conscripts, and it has had the effect of stealing the will of the Ukrainian people. And that is how we will ensure Putin fails in Ukraine, and we're there for the long haul. And that's why, I mean, again, with some of these very brutal tactics that we're seeing being reported, including by Sky News, with the harrowing pictures that we will see in our TV screens and in the newspapers, I think we've been very clear that those that engage in war crimes will be held to account. And the ICC prosecutors already...
That's absolutely it. There are war crimes happening right now in this country. Children are dying. Schools are being attacked. A kindergarten has been attacked. And the West is sanctioning Russian banks and kicking Russia out of the World Cup.
Yes, and but no, more than that, actually. I mean, I totally accept what you're saying. This is the barbarous consequences of such an appalling, aggressive action by President Putin.
Which you're not managing to stop, which you're not stopping. So
forgive me, you're interrupting me at every step, and you're frankly following this on the 24-hour news cycle, which I understand is you're at liberty to do. What we've said we're going to do is degrade Putin's war machine by starving it of the finance necessary to operate. And actually, if you look at the short-term consequences, the effect on the ruble, the effect on the stock market, the doubling of interest rates in Russia, it is having the effect that we want, and it is turning into a very, very difficult campaign for Putin, one which, and we've always said this will be disastrous for Russian for Putin and for the Russian people. But I do think we'll need to have the stamina to be in this for the long haul. And that's why making it clear, both to Putin, but also to commanders in Moscow, on the ground in Ukraine, that they will be held accountable for any violations of the laws of war. And we've shown, the West has shown that we're willing to see this through. We will not just look the other way. We had Radovan Karadzic, the butcher of the Balkans, end up in a British jail cell via The Hague recently. And that message will go to those commanders on the ground in Moscow, as well as back to in Ukraine, as well as back to Moscow, and there will be accountability for any crimes that are committed on Ukrainian soil.
And for Vladimir Putin, accountability for Vladimir Putin when it comes to war crimes?
Well, that is there as well. He is ultimately the person in charge via command responsibility. And so that is very much a factor. And this ought to play into his calculations, along with the fact that, as your reporter quite rightly said, and your clip quite rightly said, this has not been the walk in the park that he expected, either in terms of Ukrainian resistance or the effectiveness of his own tactics. So all of these things will slow down, and we hope change the calculus and get him to step back. Again, we take these actions, and the UK has done a huge amount. It's been in the vanguard, the Prime Minister, the Defence Secretary, the Foreign Secretary. But we do this with our partners, and we're willing to be in this for the long haul, because I suspect, notwithstanding the initial stuttering, Putin will respond and seek to respond in ever more heavy-handed ways with the appalling humanitarian consequences that will have.
So what about the idea of enforcing some sort of no-fly zone, some sort of humanitarian corridor? Would you support trying to enforce a no-fly zone here?
I think the Defence Secretary has already been clear on that. We're not going to do that because it will put us in a position where we would have to enforce it by, in effect, shooting down Russian planes. What we are doing is the measures that I described to you on sanctions, on supporting the Ukrainian resistance, and on the accountability piece, which I think will be even more important, and we'll hear more about that in the days and weeks ahead.
How long does British intelligence think that Kiev, the capital city here, can hold out?
Well, I'm not going to comment directly on the intelligence we get, but it's very difficult to say. The Russian initial advance has been slowed down more than they expected, and that is a testament to the Ukrainian fortitude and courage. And what we want to do is do everything we can to delay the fall of Kiev or any of the other major cities in Ukraine. And we will continue to look with our allies at every means of achieving that, so to make sure that Putin fails in Ukraine. It's critically important. That's our strategic objective.
OK, well, I mean, I suppose if he takes Kiev, he gets rid of the government, he occupies this country, I suppose he'll consider that he hasn't failed. But are we being a bit mean-spirited on visas, do you think? I wonder, a 75-year-old woman living now in a basement in the capital here, who has her son living in London, can she go and join him?
So just on your first point, you know, if Putin occupies Kiev and one or other of the major cities, that doesn't mean this is over, because I think what you'll see is Ukrainians bedding down for some form of guerrilla challenge, which will take a lot longer and could well be unresolvable from the point of view of Putin's military objectives. And indeed, your clip showed that. In terms of the question of visas and Ukrainians, the Home Secretary has set out the plans for a bespoke humanitarian scheme for Ukraine, allowing up to 100,000 to come here. The dependence of British nationals in the UK, the dependence of Ukrainians living in this country. And I think that's the right way to approach, and it follows the wider action.
But how does the 75-year-old woman, sorry to interrupt you, but how does the sirens just going off here, but how does the 75-year-old woman living with sirens going off, living in a basement, get to her son who's living in London? Can she do that? Is she able to do that? Because I can't see how she does. How does she go to Lviv, 11 hours drive away, get a visa, and then, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I don't see how she can get to her son in London under the current system.
Well, this is a consistent feature whenever we have humanitarian asylum schemes set up. We know that the difficulties on the ground make it practically very challenging, but we also know that many will get out of Ukraine, those that fleeing through fear, and we need to be ready with our international partners, the Europeans, others around the world.
The EU is saying any Ukrainian can come in. Any Ukrainian can come in for up to 3 years. Or certainly extended family members other countries are doing. Why are we not doing more? I mean,
we've set out.
My point about the 75-year-old woman is a real one.
Yes, but I can't comment on every potential hypothetical case. What I've just set out is the circumstances, and of course we understand the difficulties of the practical situation on the ground. That's common to most conflict zones, of course, and we recognise that, and we'll work with all of our international partners and the UN to try and resolve that, and to make sure that we continue this tradition of offering safe haven to those fleeing persecution. In relation to the Europeans, of course, they're closer to Ukraine. And as the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK said over the weekend, it will often be the case that first priority, most Ukrainians want to stay in Ukraine, but if they leave, they want to be as close to their home country as possible in order to be able to come back at some point in the future. So I think it's quite. This
woman wants to get to see her son in London, but you know, I mean, she doesn't want to go to Poland to stay in Poland. She wants to go and see her son in London.
Sorry, I don't know the facts of the case, but it's clear from what the Home Secretary announced yesterday that we would make that route technically open. Of course, it's very difficult to know how exactly she would traverse the country at that age. But that is the offer the Home Secretary has made. So actually, it directly addresses the scenario you've described.
OK, Dominic Raab, I appreciate you being with us. We're being slightly distracted here by sirens, but listen, I appreciate your talking to us this morning.
Good to talk to you.